Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of For What It's Nerd. Today, we're doing something slightly different, because we're going to discuss something that I've been holding off on for quite some time, and that is finishing the comics of Star Wars. So that sounds a bit weird. What do I mean by that? I was very busy the past few years. I'm very busy still, but I found myself with more time more recently because of change of career, etc. And basically, long story short, Star Wars comics come out once a month, and there's a few issues. I think there's like 4 mainline series. Yeah, four. Yeah, and then some kind of extra special events and stuff. And so I was always be behind because what I waited for in the past was for the Star Wars Omnibus to come out, and then I would purchase that on the Marvel Comics app. Now, that changed a little bit when I got Marvel Unlimited as well. So not only did I have more time to actually read the comics, and not only did it mean that I actually paid more attention to when they released, I had the Marvel Unlimited app, which means that I can, for around £8 a month, I can access pretty much the entire backlog of Marvel and Star Wars comics from like the last however many years up to about 3 months prior to the current date. So it's a lot easier to get the comics you want. Because as well, let me clarify. Marvel Comics, great app by the way. I really did enjoy it, but the price of a single issue is about $2.99. But then when the omnibus would release, it would be about $14.99 for 6 issues. So I think it worked out. You pay £3 for one, so 3 times 6, about so 3 times 6. What's that? Gosh, oh maths. It's about the same. It's about just over. It's a bit more expensive than the omnibus was. So I usually waited for the omnibus because I wasn't in a huge rush to read the comics. They don't bear on as much as you'd think, even though they are some of the more interesting characters and storylines in Star Wars at times. But yeah, so long story short, I left it behind for a long while, and now I'm catching up. Marvel Unlimited really helped with that, is basically what I'm trying to say. So finally, we're here. I've just read all of the mainline comics from 2020 up to 2023, May 2023, I think, if I remember correctly. So I'm done. I'm kind of done for now. And yeah, so I thought I'd kind of discuss them a bit. I've got to be honest. I found them interesting, all interesting in their own right. If I were to rank them, personally, I feel like the Darth Vader and Star Wars comics are still the better ones. Bounty Hunters thereafter, and I feel like Dr. Aphra has dropped off, should I say, in a big way. I'm not as I don't enjoy Dr. Aphra as much as I used to. I think I enjoyed Aphra a lot more when she had her original crew. I feel like the characters that they try and bring in now to coexist with her, whilst interesting to a point, aren't as interesting as 000, and the astromech, which I'm forgetting right now, Black Chrysanthemum, and when she teamed up with Vader all the time. Like, that was more of an interesting period of Dr. Aphra comics for me personally. But don't get me wrong, Aphra's still a really interesting character. I'd love to see her expanded upon more, maybe one day brought to live action, etc., etc. But Aphra is definitely, in my opinion, the lesser of the 4 comics. Again, Bounty Hunters thereafter, that's third, because I find that the Bounty Hunters comics started with focus on Bail Valance, and I like Valance, and I think he's an interesting character, and I like the focus on Bosk and Dengar and Forlom and Zuckuss, or 4-Elom, should I say? No, 4-Elom, or Elom, that's how you pronounce it. But I don't really like the ancillary plot they seem to be having going on with the clans in that book, and it's not of interest to me. So that one, not particularly great. Star Wars itself, I really do enjoy because I feel like they explore the main cast of Star Wars, Luke, Leia, etc., in a very positive and interesting way, really expanding those characters, really adding to the stories that you see in the movies, and also giving more time to characters like Amelin Holdo, which I've always been a fan of Amelin. She's prominent at the moment in the comics, and stuff like that. So also it really expands on Lando, which we all love more Lando content. But the magnum opus for me, I've got to be honest, and I feel like this is kind of cliche to say because I feel like a lot of people probably say this as well, but it is the Vader comics. And I've got to be honest, it's for no other reason than their ability to really dig deep into the lore of Anakin in dealing with Vader. A lot of like fiction and a lot of like fans and a lot of the movies really try and separate the two. Even now that we kind of have this moment where we don't try and distance ourselves from the prequels quite so much. But this comic is all about the prequels impacting on Vader. And I love it. I think the best thing that they ever did for Vader as a character was introduce Sabe, in this comic specifically, was introduce Sabe as kind of like his foil. I think she's a really interesting foil because he essentially sees in her not Padme exactly, but a relic, a remnant, a part of Padme that's really interesting to kind of. It's almost like an Elseworld story without going to a multiversal outlet, if that makes sense. It feels like you've got Vader and Padme on the page, so to speak, in an Imperial setting. Not exactly, because Sabe and Padme are different, but yeah. So I've got to be honest, my favorite is Vader. With that said, I have to also make a mention of the big storyline that has been going across all of the comics in the past. I think it was like the end of 2021 into 2022, and that was the Crimson Dawn storyline. And I know I'm behind on this, so I'm obviously very, very behind on this, but I want to make a comment on it because I think I've got to be honest. I feel like it's very, very much wasted potential. The beginning was actually quite interesting. This idea that Crimson Dawn were resurgent. They had certain links to these groups that we were all aware of, and atop all of that, Kira had taken over, and her goal was to eradicate the Sith, which was fair because Maul was her master for a bit, so to speak, as we saw at the end of Solo, and how that panned out. Obviously, we don't know exactly because Maul died in Rebels, but it would be interesting to see where that would go, right? So the beginning was very interesting, but then it felt like it went off the rails a bit. It felt like I know what they were trying to do, and I get that they couldn't do it because obviously Kira couldn't kill Vader or Palpatine. But it feels like the story just became very, very ineffectual very, very quickly because you're trying to fill a gap. You're trying to fill a gap in the story that essentially causes the story to be ineffectual. I keep saying the same thing. What I'm trying to say is that the Crimson Dawn story would have been better, I believe, in a situation where they could have potentially taken out a member of the Imperial government, like let's say a different Moff, or the next Grand Moff that we've never heard about after Tarkin, for example. Like if they're going after another Grand Moff, or if they're dealing with a governor of a planet, or a governor of a sector, or something like that. It felt like going for Palpatine and Vader was too high stakes for Crimson Dawn because it just made the whole thing pointless because you knew how it was going to end badly. And they even played out the storyline that way. Like they even said, "Oh, this is how Crimson Dawn fell in the first issue of Hidden Empire." I believe that's the one. So was it Crimson Reign? I forget whichever one it was. The last set of the story, and I don't know. I think it had such an interesting idea, and then it fell flat on it because what they wanted to do was try and imply that Kira was going after Palpatine and Vader, which you can't do because they're already locked in as to regards their fate. I also think it could have been better if it was done as an attack on the Imperial Remnant or like an attack on the galaxy generally after Return of the Jedi. But I just felt it was a very weird thing to do, and I don't necessarily hate it. I just think I came to the end of it. I was like, okay, moving on. I don't know. I think the books tried to go too far with that, and I think they didn't succeed. It was almost gimmicky, and that feels bad to say, but it feels true because like it was like, okay, well, how do we get all these characters from, like, how do we deal with how do we bring in the Knights of Ren to an earlier part of the Star Wars universe? How do we bring in Ochi Bestoon? How do we? And also, it just like those characters who were part of Crimson Dawn or became part of Crimson Dawn that didn't feel quite right. Like Sly Moore being part of Crimson Dawn felt weird to me because it felt like she was very much an adherent to Palpatine. So why is she working with Crimson Dawn? There was a lot of things, and it's hard to categorize it all because I think some of it is simply just a feeling. But yeah, I think that these comics can at times be very, very outlandish, and that's okay because comics are meant to be outlandish. But yeah, I didn't mesh with that whole overarching storyline so much. I also feel like the reliance on the new thing is also very strong in the comics. I don't know if it's so much true of everything else. The books, not so much, I don't think. But like, for example, the Nile have been referenced like loads in these comics now. And it's like, okay, I get that this is your new thing that you've got and you want to tie into it a little bit. But like, I feel like sometimes if you create a new thing and then you try and populate it everywhere at once, it gets weird. Like, for example, this is something that I noticed very much going through the High Republic, that suddenly there was a lot of Mickeyan characters in Star Wars, in the High Republic story. Like, there's like, I can think of two straight off the bat, but there's more. There's definitely more. And like, it just feels like suddenly everyone wants to make Mickeyan characters in their stories. And it's like, okay, but that starts to feel weird, right? Starts to feel uncanny because why have we suddenly got all these characters who are of the same species just suddenly showing up and being sort of relevant? Which I know sounds weird to say, but it does kind of take you out of it because it's like suddenly like, oh well, we must push this for some reason. It's like if suddenly because Ahsoka got popular or whatever, they brought in like 10 different other Togruta characters. You'd be like, hello? It doesn't, it feels almost synthesized. And I suppose that's my issue with some things like this, is that it has to feel natural when you pick a choice to do things like this. You can't just be like, oh, I'm going to bring in the Nile because interesting. It has to be, I'm going to bring in the Nile because they're the best reason for this story that we're trying to tell. And some of it was fair, that like the Nile having a engine that they needed to get to this place that was going to be interesting to discover. Yeah, cool. Okay, fine. But not like there's like 3 different engines that show up that are the Nile throughout, like, I think 10 issues of comics or something like that. That might be a bit extreme, but what I'm trying to say is I think that Star Wars falls into the habit too often of like, this is our new thing, let's go hard in on that, instead of having multiple interesting things going on at once. But yeah, so I'm very happy that I'm up to date now. That's obviously a good thing. And the comics you can't take too seriously, as I say, because they are a bit different to even the books. Because the books take themselves generally a bit more seriously, and then obviously the shows and then the movies. Now, obviously, they're still canon, but like some discrepancy can be a little bit more allowable, so to speak. But yeah, I've got to be honest. I think I'm okay not racing to the comics again very soon. Like, I think I'm happy I'm up to date, but I think in the future I'll just wait again. Like, I probably will wait another 6 months to a year and then pick up and read all the comics again, because it felt like it was such an undertaking to begin with, like from the start. But not just that, it felt like because it was like 35 comics times 4 time plus 10, so like what, that's like 120, say 140 comics, let's say, in total, because there was a few standalone issues for the War of the Bounty Hunters stuff as well. Also, that wasn't a war. The War of the Bounty Hunters was one of the most, like, don't get me wrong, I didn't care for the later stuff from Crimson Dawn, but War of the Bounty Hunters, even though it was interesting to see these comics start to like tie into each other, was very, very dull because it felt like it was just it felt like every comic was retreading the same ground because they didn't want anyone to miss anything in case someone wasn't reading the other comics. And it's like, okay, I get it, but also I hate it, you know? But anyway, I think I've rambled enough about comics. I just thought I'd make a little bit of an interesting, different video talking about the fact that I have finally caught up to date on Star Wars comics. Well, sort of up to date, nearly up to date, as close as up to date as I can be right now. But yeah, if I lost my ability to speak for a second there. If you guys have read the comics, let me know what you think. If you guys are up to date, let me know what you think. And if you're not, which one would be your favorite to read? Dr. Aphra, War of the not War of the Bounty Hunters, Star Wars itself, or Darth Vader? I'd like to know which one's your favorite. Yeah, I think we'll leave it there, guys. Thank you for watching / listening, and I'll speak to you later. Bye, guys.